and birth are momentous times in a woman's life, during which your body undergoes huge physiological and psychological changes. A woman's body in pregnancy is devoted to growing, nurturing, and birthing a new little human. This is the biggest challenge your body will ever undergo, and the postpartum period, whereby recovery is so key, is often overlooked and neglected. And for many women, exercise forms part of their identity and hugely influences their overall wellness. The benefits of exercise for our physical and mental health are well understood, and after giving birth, this is often more important than ever. However, it's also important we return to exercise in a safe and sensible way in the postpartum, and to evict any unrealistic or unhealthy expectations. On this week's episode, I am delighted to be joined by the wonderful Amy Lane. Amy is the award-winning digital editor for Women's Health magazine, a qualified fitness expert and runner. But Amy's bio doesn't stop there. She's also an author. Her brilliant book, I Can Run, is linked in the episode description, and is such an honest and motivating read that literally leaves you saying, I can run. Amy also hosts her weekly running podcast, Wellfar, with the aim to make running inclusive and accessible to all, to help get us all out there and moving. And I have to thank Amy, as Wellfar has got me through many a training run over the last couple of years. More recently, Amy has also become a mum to her gorgeous little boy, Huxley. On Amy's Instagram account at wellness_ed, she has shared snippets from her postpartum journey and how her goals and approach to exercise has changed as she prioritises her body's recovery and navigates life in the motherhood club. So welcome, Amy, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on, and thanks to everyone who's downloaded this and is listening to it.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? Just to start discussing kind of how it is in real life, because the media hasn't helped us as women over the years in setting up some of those kind of expectations of our postpartum body. But you have done an amazing job of keeping that real and sharing kind of your experience, I suppose.
Thank you. It's been quite an experience, I have to say, and I think I definitely wasn't ready for the fourth trimester. Hadn't even heard that term until very late on in my pregnancy, and I saw it being bandied about a little bit on social media, and I still was not prepared for after birth. Like, I was prepared to look after a baby. I had that in my head. I had my nappies ready. I had my stations set up, my breastfeeding stations, but I really wasn't prepared to look after my own body and understand what it needed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It's mad, isn't it? We prepare so much for our baby and for birth and completely forget that we've got to recover from this like massive life-changing event. Now, Amy, what does kind of exercise mean to you, and has it kind of always been a big part of your life? Because for anyone that follows you will know that you're an avid runner, and obviously working for Women's Health, you've always seemed to have led quite an active kind of lifestyle.
So I would say movement has always been part of my lifestyle. At school, I gave it my very best on the rounders team and the netball team. I was terrible. At university, I joined the netball club, and one of my now best friends was president of the netball club, and she never let me play one game because I was so bad. But I turned up for training every week, and I went to the socials, of course. And so it's always been there in some form, but it's always changed over the years. So I suppose when I was younger, back kind of school and then university, as I've mentioned, it was there as like a hobby. And it was there as a social kind of element. And then in my early 20s, exercise became the mechanic for weight loss. So I exercise for aesthetics, and I think a lot of people do. It's normally your kind of gateway into getting into the gym, going, I want to change something about myself. And that took its own journey, and it ran its course. And then I found running, and I started to really appreciate exercise for the joy that it can bring you rather than the punishment. And it just gave me a different appreciation of my body. And it made me realize how I'd been using exercise as kind of punishment over the years, or not even just punishment for my body, but just punishment for like the stresses of life. I don't know about you, but like whenever I had a really hard day, I'd go, I need to go do a really grueling workout. Like I need to punch out this stress. And the more I've learned over the years, obviously in my job, I read a lot of research, and the more I've realized that actually you don't need more stress. You actually need something to balance out that stress. And so yeah, exercise has evolved. It's always looked a bit different. There's been different reasons, but it's always been there.
That's such a good point. I love that, in that not using exercise as a form of punishment, actually using it to bring you joy and doing what you truly enjoy. And that's such a good point, especially when it comes to kind of pregnancy and postpartum exercise. Because I can imagine, Amy, your goals for your exercise kind of pre-pregnancy, you were like marathon training and really like upping some miles and putting so much intensity into your workouts. So in the kind of postpartum period, and I guess pregnancy period, how did your kind of goals change, and how did you view your body? Because you must have thought of it quite differently to that pre-pregnancy kind of missions that we were on.
Yeah, and so actually I just left that whole part out, didn't I? And so
That's all right.
can I still say baby brain? Am I allowed to say baby brain at
Absolutely,
four and a
yeah.
half
Baby
months?
brain lasts.
Brilliant. And so yeah, and so about it was a year ago, I found out I was pregnant. And I found out really early on. I'd gone into the hospital for a colonoscopy, and I'd had to fill out forms. And there's obviously the question on the form, could you be pregnant? And we'd been trying for a baby for about a year. And I wrote down on the form, like, no, I'm not pregnant, but I mean, there's a chance, but I'm definitely not. And there was all these words on the form, and this person must have thought, slightly odd. Anyway, so the nurse went away, she came back and she went, oh, if there's a chance you could be pregnant, we need to do a test. And so I did this test, but anyone who's listening in who's had a colonoscopy will know that you're not allowed liquids or solids, and you actually have to do a bowel prep in the days before. So peeing on this pregnancy stick was one of the hardest things I've done to date. I was there, I couldn't even get a couple of drips of urine, and I was thinking, oh, for God's sake. Anyway, finally did it, and I looked at this pregnancy test, and there was kind of two blue lines, but I was like, absolutely not, I'm not pregnant. So I handed it back to the nurse, and she said, just give me 1 minute and just sit back down. And I'm still in like the open gown here, trying to keep it closed because I'm sat on these seats with everyone else. And anyway, so then I went round the corner, they called me into a cubicle, and there was actually like 2 doctors, 3 nurses, and I walked in, and they all just started clapping, and they were like, oh my God, you're pregnant. And I was like, is this some kind of weird TV show? Like, what's going on? Am I being pranked? And so anyway, it transpired that I was pregnant, but I was about 3.5 weeks from working out my dates, and so like literally days pregnant. And so I went home, and I was terrified for the first 12 weeks. And I think because it had taken us this kind of year to get pregnant, and then I found out at that point where obviously things could go wrong and you wouldn't even normally know, you'd think it was just a heavy period or something. It set this like fear off inside of me. So I still exercised in the first trimester, but I became terrified of doing anything too intense, which I was used to, like you said, I was used to doing really intense exercise. And so I really dialed it back. And also I was exhausted in that first trimester. I felt terrible. I was falling asleep at 7 p.m. as soon as I got in from work. I got addicted to egg mayonnaise sandwiches from Pret. And they're the only things that got me through the day. And that was I'd walk to Pret and back, and that was kind of the extent of my walking. And so that first trimester, there wasn't really any goals. It was just like, get through, and get through to that point where I saw that 12-week scan and I could go, everything's going to be fine. I don't need to be googling miscarriage rates at 9 weeks and 3 days anymore, because I was in that headspace. And so then after that I really started to enjoy it, but the goals for exercise became, how can I get through this pregnancy feeling great? And I'd seen people around me who'd not exercised through pregnancy, and there'd been a lot of complaints about aches and pains, especially backache. And I started to do quite a lot of research and chat to some postnatal trainers, and I found out that actually I could do quite a lot of movement in my week, as long as I was doing it safely and exercises were adapted as I went along. And so I picked back up my running, and I had a strength program, and I was still running at about 7 months.
Amazing.
I took my fitness tracker off actually, and I stopped wearing my watch, so that I was only running by feel. So I literally ran at the pace that felt good. I went for as far as, felt good. I did a lot of run walking. And during that time, I was still lifting weights in our gym. When I say gym, it's our garage.
Yeah, I can totally appreciate that at the moment. We have a garage gym.
Garage gym. And in the week, and then towards the end, I added in more yoga. And I was still moving up until, in fact, the day that Huxley was born. Well, the day before, the day before I did a 5K walk around the fields. And so for me at the time, like that exercise, the goal for that exercise was to feel good, but it was also to give me something else in my day that wasn't work, because obviously we were all locked down. There was no socializing as well. So I ended up exercising as much for the mental benefits as the physical benefits.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the mental benefits when it comes to physical activity are incredible. If anything, they could potentially outweigh the kind of physical benefits. And I love that you just seem to kind of exercise, Amy, quite intuitively. Like it sounds like your body was kind of leading the way and you were going along with however that felt. And the tip about taking your watch off is amazing, because for anyone who is used to running, especially like you who's entered races and being used to kind of a schedule and kind of times to be looking at, you have to kind of accept, don't you, that your body is undergoing this massive adaptation. Every single part of your body is changing to grow this little life. And you're not going to run in the way that you may have run beforehand. Your posture's changed. Your hormones are causing your ligaments and your muscular structure to adapt. And we've got to just be kind to ourselves and kind of cut a bit of slack, haven't we, I suppose?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you actually mentioned about we run in a different way. I think in the beginning, like it took me until about 20. I was looking at pictures yesterday. I think I got a proper bump around kind of 20 weeks. Before that, I thought I had a bump. I didn't. It just looked like I'd eaten a little bit too much.
It's Christmas Day.
Yeah, and I do have quite an athletic frame, and whilst a lot of that does come from the exercise or / training I've done over the years, a lot of it is genetics as well. My mum is in her 60s, my nan is in her late 70s. They've both got visible abs. It's
amazing genetics to have, Amy. We are all very envious.
I know, I am very lucky, but it does mean that it's when I was pregnant, I didn't get. I craved the lovely round bump that I kept seeing all these other women, and at the time it just looked like that. My torso was just going out further and further, but was still very flat and hard. Anyway, about 20 weeks, my body finally went, I can't cope with this. I'm gonna burst a little bit, and I started to get the lovely round bump, and it was at that point that I did realize that it was affecting my running, and I did really, really slow down. And I had to think about, when I was running, much more of my pelvic alignment, because I started to be heavy on the front, and I'd got these boobs. I've never had boobs before. And everything was there was my boobs bouncing on the front, and then there was my bump, and I suddenly realized I was quite stoopy when I was running. So I really had to kind of like take it back, take it a lot slower, but be a lot more mindful of my form, and just make sure that, you know, I was using my glutes to run and not just my quads, and thinking about picking my feet up. But I did it, and it was different, but it was brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where that strength train that you also were doing comes in, doesn't it? Like getting that posture strong. I always think about birth as like a marathon. So your like pregnancy journey is essentially your marathon training program. And I don't know about you, Amy, but as a marathon runner myself as well, I would never sign up to one and then sit on the sofa for 9 months. And pregnancy is kind of the same, right? We don't want to sign up to this amazing birth and then just sit back for 9 months and not prepare our body for the demands of pregnancy and motherhood. I mean, you're figuring out now how things that are created for babies and mums are the most awkward to pick up. You're forever doing essentially like single leg deadlifts with a weight and bending over without even realizing.
Oh, I've got something at the moment which is apparently called mommy wrist, American term. But it's from scooping Huxley up the whole time, and where he is a very solid chap, we will say, he's almost like stressed out the tendons in my wrist, and I've got like wrist strain essentially. Literally from scooping him up and picking him up the whole time.
All the things that you didn't think would happen in the postpartum period. I love it.
No.
So Amy, how different has it been, other than the wrist strain that we probably didn't prepare for at all? How different has it been, kind of the postpartum and your kind of return to exercise? Has it been very different to what you imagined?
So it has, you know, because I left at this point where I was feeling brilliant. The day before I went into labour, I skipped into my midwife appointment. I was 37 weeks and I was like, I feel amazing. It's the best I've ever felt. And she was like, take it easy. And sorry, you might need to, my Siri thing keeps popping up. I'm not sure. Remove.
I can't hear it.
Okay, just keeps coming up, you know, when the box, and it keeps putting in what I'm saying. I'm not sure why.
Oh.
Sorry, you'll have to cut that bit.
That's all right, anyway.
So I skipped into my midwife appointment. I was like, I feel amazing. And she was like, take it easy. And I was like, okay. And then obviously the next morning I got up and I did this 5K walk around the fields, and I felt great. Although looking back on it, I was in early labour because I kept stopping and going, oh, I've got a niggle, but let's just keep going. Anyway, and then I went into labour and I actually had a really traumatic birth. And I ended up going under general anaesthetic, and Huxley ended up being in intensive care for a week. And I came out of that experience. It's one of those experiences which I will never forget, but almost the whole experience feels quite hazy. And so I came out of that experience, and after I would say about 6 weeks, I was like, I'm ready to start moving again. I was not before that point. I was dealing with my traumatic birth, but I was also exhausted. And I know people talk about new parent exhaustion, but I just wasn't ready for like how hard it is. Like I thought there was exhaustion, but then new parent exhaustion just seems to be like normal exhaustion times 100. And so in my head I thought, I'm going to get to 6 weeks, I'm going to get signed off at the doctor, and I'm going to skip back into my workout routines and all of these people that say they don't have enough time because they've got a newborn baby. I was like, I'm going to break that mold. I'm going to be fine. Like, I know what I'm doing. I've got all the kit at home. You know, I'm going to show people it's possible. Well, in truth, I got to 6 weeks and actually I thought I was ready to move. And then when I tried to kind of find time in my week to do it, there just wasn't any. And then I quickly realized that actually I didn't want to go back to exercise in my gym kit away from my baby. And I really, really enjoyed just going for walks. And actually, when you're walking to get them to sleep and to have naps, there is no more time in the day, because they say do things when the baby naps. But if you're walking to get him to nap, then that time's already taken up. And so it was really at about 12 weeks, I would say, about 3 months, that I really got back into doing some movement. Um, and I'd started seeing a women's health specialist because I was having some pelvic floor dysfunction. I'd had an episiotomy before going under GA, and I did actually have a vaginal birth, but had forceps. And so I was experiencing pelvic floor dysfunction, and I hadn't really given it enough time and attention. And so I saw a women's health physio who gave me exercises for that. And then I've got a bit of a dodgy hip from being in stirrups. And so I knew that I needed to get back to some form of exercise to deal with those issues. And so I started doing as much as I could on those sessions. And then I started running. I started Couch to 5K when Huxley was about 16 weeks. And I've just been taking it easy. So I, I I'm just I'm a very different me, I think, to what I thought I was going to be. I thought I was just going to be able to pick back up again where I left off. And the reality is starting to move again after you haven't done very much for 3 months is actually really hard. And you can't pick back up where you left off because you're not that person anymore, and your body's been through so much change, but also your day has been through so much change, and you don't have the luxury of doing things when you want to. I mean, I set my alarm the other morning for 6:15 just so that I could get up and have a bit of time before Huxley got up, and all I wanted to do was have a cup of tea that was hot and have 20 minutes on a yoga mat just doing my pelvic floor rehab, and doing a few exercises, also rehab work for my core. And that's all I wanted to do, and I was going to do it in my pajamas. And it was the one day that he woke up at 6:05. Like,
he
this
knew
he knew this baby gets that I have to wake him up most days. He's like a teenager. And this one day he got up at 6:05, and it was just like, and you just have to roll with it. And so coming back postpartum has just been a massive, massive eye-opening experience on how hard it is for mums, both body, mind, and just time, and also the guilt. Like the guilt of going, you know, I'm going to leave you here whilst I go and do something for me, is quite tough if they're awake, I think, especially when they're small.
Yeah, that's such good points, Amy, and actually really, really good for women listening to hear that actually we need to keep it real and be kind to ourselves and not rush. I think sometimes as well, just because you can physically do something, it doesn't mean it's the right thing for you to do, especially like you say, when you've gone through pregnancy and birth in whatever means, your pelvic floor has taken a bit of a hammering. It's really stretched to accommodate all of those changes. And without really rehabilitating it properly, and the fact that you saw a women's health physio is amazing. I mean, massive shout out to all the women's health physios, because they are worth their weight in gold. And we definitely don't utilize them as much as we should. I really, really wish on the NHS that it was part of like your standard post birth recovery, but unfortunately it's not, is the reality usually, and it's left for women to go and seek that service, which is a massive change. And I pray that in years to come that really will be something that we improve for women. But ensuring that your pelvic floor can tolerate you then going for longer walks, or increasing that into a jog and doing kind of things like squats, is really important. Otherwise you find that you might kind of trot along quite nicely for 5, 6, 8 weeks, but then later down the line there's a problem that sets you back 12 months, and actually you don't really achieve what you think you might be. So taking that step back and seeing professional people is so important, isn't it?
I wasn't prepared for that. I just and I just wish that I knew more from the beginning, because I was in hospital for a week, and it was only on day 4 that I raised that I was having issues with the midwives. And actually I feel that somebody probably should have asked me, like, how's your pelvic floor function? Are you having X, Y, and Z off a list of symptoms? And I didn't get asked that. And because I think if I had, I would have spoken up sooner. Um, and B, if I knew more about actually what I needed to be doing in those early weeks, then rather than getting further along the line and going, actually, things aren't right, I now need to have help, I could have started it earlier on. And there is still an embarrassment around pelvic floor dysfunction. However, it affects so many women. And for me, I know that I don't want to live with it for the rest of my life. Like, I know that I want to go back to an active lifestyle, which I'm doing at the moment. And so, yeah, like you said, I just wish that there was more help available, or at least you knew what to look out for and then how to talk about those symptoms properly to then get the help that you need.
Yeah, you're so right. Because pelvic floor symptoms, or symptoms of a dysfunctional pelvic floor, we should probably say, because they are so common, we've almost normalized it when it absolutely isn't normal. So to anyone who is experiencing any pelvic pain, pain with intercourse, any leaking when you cough, sneeze, laugh, an urge to go to the toilet, so you need to go and you need to go now, else you're going to have an accident, anything like that, it's really important that you do speak to your GP and get referred to a women's health or a pelvic health physio, because there's loads that can be done and you absolutely don't need to live with those symptoms. But like you say, it's so common, and we see the Tenor Lady adverts and think, oh, well, it's normal, we just put a pad on, but it's not.
Yeah. And so for me, that's what I was then working on, so that I had the right like foundations within my body, so that actually I can then pick up the pace and I can move more. And, further down the line, I have this vision of me doing buggy running, and I'd love to do that. I moved out of London last year to enjoy the countryside. And whilst I'm on maternity this year, I'd love to be able to take Huxley out and get in those fields. But I know that that is still a long way off.
But it will happen. It totally
It
will
will
happen.
happen.
And that'll be a beautiful moment. How did you know, Amy, when you felt ready to start kind of doing some exercise, even the kind of really gentle exercise with Huxley with you? How did you know that it was the kind of right time for you?
So I think I'd got a good night's sleep.
Always
Um,
good.
yeah, yeah, I'd got a good night's sleep, and we'd found a rhythm with breastfeeding. So that's another thing I wasn't prepared for, is the kind of the the pressure that comes from breastfeeding, in the fact that it's such a beautiful thing to be doing. However, you do have to make sure that your day fits around your feed. So you can't go out and do exercise before you feed, really, because your boobs are so big, and in the beginning you're leaking and it's just uncomfortable. And so you've got to knock out that kind of 90 minutes, say, before you're feeding, and then you're feeding, and then you've probably got 90-minute window before you need to start feeding again. And actually, in those 90 minutes, you normally want to have a shower, eat some food, go to the toilet, without having a baby on a changing mat in front of you. And so actually, there is quite a lot of, I don't want to say the word pressure, but it breastfeeding does take up a lot of your day. And I just think you have to be really realistic with that. And so in the early days, when the baby's not feeding every 3 or 4 hours, I just think it's quite tough. And so once he'd been going a little bit longer with his feeds, and he'd also been sleeping, I was suddenly like, I feel a bit more human, and I feel like I can expend my energy in a workout. Before that, like I've mentioned, the exhaustion was just too much. And so I decided that I'd just get up and I'd just try doing a few exercises in the morning. And I think that the kind of the postnatal exercise space is really coming on, but I think it's still a really underserviced space for women, unless you know where to look. I'm fortunate that through my career, I do know of the experts to go to, and I had been saving Instagrams. So for instance, I follow Bumps and Burpees, and I love a lot of their posts. And I'd been following a women's physio called Emma Brockwell, and she'd done a return to running IG series. And so I'd collectioned that before having Huxley, and there was some body weight exercises on there. So I'd started off just doing them on a mat. But I know for a lot of women, you wouldn't know where to go. Um, and so actually knowing when to start and knowing what to start with can be really tough.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, Amy. And actually, both those amazing women that you spoke about, so both Charlie from Bumps to Burpees and also Emma Brockwell, are both on the podcast. So they both share some of their tips as well. So hopefully, women will have a really well-rounded idea about what it's really like from you, and then also some of the tips and tricks to kind of getting started, which hopefully will be really helpful. Most definitely.
And
Now,
then the other thing, I
yeah,
was going to
sorry, Amy,
say,
carry on. No, carry on.
so then the other thing I did was I laid out a mat in the living room, and rather than saying I'm going to do my workout at 10 and I'm going to do 20 minutes, I quickly realized in that first week that that wasn't possible. And so I just had the mat laid out all the time, and I got up and I put on my gym kit. And then those body weight exercises, I just fit in when I could around the day, and that just took the pressure off. So most days, and when I say most days, I mean this happened like twice a week. So don't think that I suddenly started a 5-day-a-week exercise program, because I didn't. And if anyone can do that listening in, then I applaud you. Please tell me how you did it. I didn't. I was doing a couple of days a week, and I just did it when I could. And often that might be 15 minutes when Huxley was awake, and then it might be 10 minutes in the evening whilst my husband and I was watching something on the telly.
Yeah, that's a really
That
good
was
way of kind of fitting it in, because actually, like you say, blocking off kind of half an hour or 45 minutes is really difficult to manage. Whereas if you have got kind of literally 5 minutes here and there, and also when you are breastfeeding, Amy, did you find that quite often you were in positions that were causing you to get a bit of neck pain, a bit of shoulder pain, because you were quite often hunched over feeding? So having that moment just to go and do some squats or move your body in a different way can kind of help with some of those like aches and pains as well, can't it?
Oh, 100%. And I'd made the mistake of not getting myself a feeding chair in the beginning. I'd just thought, do you know what? I'll just feed in bed. And actually, feeding in bed when you're feeding that much is actually quite uncomfortable, even if you prop yourself up with loads and loads of pillows. And so one morning I woke up and hadn't had very much sleep, and Huxley had fed probably about every 2 hours in the night and was feeding for an hour each time. And so I really hadn't had much sleep. And so I'd spent most of the night kind of propped up and trying to get comfortable in these pillows. And I just said to my husband, I was like, I need a feeding chair and I need one today. And so I just went onto Facebook Marketplace, and we bought one. And that made such a difference to my kind of overall aches and pains, because I was sitting properly. But also I do wish that I had been doing some upper body stretches from the beginning, just simply like 5 minutes of mobility whilst watching telly or something. Because like you said, it does get really sore, and especially as they get heavy. Like Huxley now is over a stone, and it's like I've got that on my arms, like probably for 4 hours a day feeding. And that's a lot of weight. I wouldn't
That's a
hold a weight.
workout in itself.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold a weight in a gym for 4 hours, just casually cuddling it. But yeah, I do my baby. So
Yeah, that's such a good point, isn't it? And that's why kind of preparing your body for these kind of normal motherhood things that you have to do, that we don't necessarily consider formal exercise, but they're absolutely a demand on your body, is really, really important.
well, that's why when people were saying to me when I was 30 weeks pregnant, and they kept going, you be careful with that kettlebell, and should you be lifting weights? And my mother questioned it a couple of times, and I was like, but yet the weights which I'm currently carrying in my hands, like by the end I'd really lowered my weights, but like at the time my weights were kind of equal to the weight of a car seat, or equal to the weight of shopping bags, which whilst pregnant I was still carrying back from the supermarket, and that type of thing. So I think that we need to realize that actually a lot of the time, if you exercise right, it's not for just getting strong in the gym, it's for getting strong for life, and actually how that does help you through your everyday and helps you move better, helps you stop getting injured, and like I've said, lifting a stone baby.
Yeah, I'm so pleased you said that, Amy. I'm so passionate about us trying to prepare for all these things. So it's brilliant to hear how you've done it in real life. Now, Amy, I just wonder, what are some of the things that you wish someone had told you about kind of returning to exercise in the postpartum? If you'd known these things, it would have made it a bit easier, perhaps.
So I wish that somebody had sat me down and explained the reasons why strengthening your pelvic floor is so crucial to going back to exercising. It shouldn't be a meh, I might do it. It needs to be a, if you want to move and you want to move well and enjoy it, you need this internal strength. I wish somebody had told me that. I wish somebody had told me that actually the 6 week checkup isn't really your pass to go and exercising. Our GPs do a brilliant job, but that 6 week checkup, there is a lot that goes on in it. And actually, it's not really a deep dive into whether you're ready to exercise or not. It's them saying there is nothing alarming here to say that you shouldn't. But actually, I don't think they actually do know deep down whether you are. Um, and actually then knowing what is the right exercise to go back into. So even myself, with I've done quite a lot of research and I have quite a good grasp of exercise and what we should be doing when, but still I was surprised to discover that actually we shouldn't be running until 12 weeks. And even at 12 weeks, it's a, are you ready to run? It's not a, you're now 3 months postpartum, you can go out and run as far as you want. You should be doing like a progressive program. And I think that if someone had just told me those things, I would have had a better awareness of actually how much recovery we need to do after pregnancy, and how actually just because you've birthed the baby, it doesn't mean that the changes in your body have stopped. And actually, we need to have this awareness that it might take you a year to be back in the same place as you were before pregnancy. That's not saying with the same body at all, because it's never going to be the same. You've had your child, it's amazing. But it could take that long for everything really to heal, recover, for you to get over your sleep debt, all of these things.
That's such a good point, isn't it? Because you grow a baby over 9 months, give or take. We can't expect to suddenly be completely transformed and back to that pre-pregnancy state, whatever that is, in like 6 weeks. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. We need to give our bodies that proper time to recover well.
And I just think that there is this pressure on women to, I think, try and go back to their old lives, but those lives don't exist anymore. So actually be really realistic with how much time you've got, how much energy you've got, and how much you want to do. And if for you you've only got half an hour a week, it's like, well, actually think about where that's best spent. If you've got a sore part of your body, like how can you work on the strength for that? You don't have to be doing what everyone else is doing. You just need to really dial down into what's going to give you the most benefit and what's going to make you feel healthiest, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Getting rid of that source of comparison, which is definitely difficult to do. I think we've all fallen guilty into that trap before. But it is really important that you're on your own journey, and it doesn't matter what, your next door neighbor or your best friend or that person on Instagram's doing. This is your journey and it's going to be unique.
Yeah, and everyone's baby is unique as well. So everyone is having a completely different ride. And so actually everyone else's lifestyles, they need to be individual, because actually we're all experiencing something completely individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what would be your 3 top tips, Amy? Everyone that comes on, I always ask for 3 top tips, and I'm afraid you haven't escaped. So would you be able to share your 3 top tips to a new mum who is navigating their postpartum kind of recovery journey?
Okay, so I think number one would be, don't overlook the benefits of nap laps, I like to call them. So walking with your baby either in the sling or in the pram, you quickly clock up a lot of mileage without realizing. I remember looking at my phone and in the Apple Health section and looking at my step count and realizing that I'd actually be doing 5k a day of just out with the pram. So you might feel like you're not moving very much, but actually in reality you probably are. So have a look at that and celebrate what you are doing rather than focusing on what you're not doing. I think secondly, I would don't underestimate the benefits of sleep. So if you are really, really exhausted, focus on getting more rest before picking up the pace. And thirdly, I would say, what would be my third one? Follow some pelvic floor accounts to understand really why we all need to be strengthening our pelvic floor. So there's a brilliant account run by some friends of mine called Umi Health, Umi Health, and they give loads of free advice on why we should be doing it, because actually you want to feel confident in your movement, and I think that if you don't work on your pelvic floor, that might not happen. So get that sorted and get that strong and get your core strong again, and then when you're moving well, you can move more.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. And I love that we have spoken about pelvic floor today, Amy, because it is just so important. So that's definitely a take-home message for anyone listening.
Oh, I've got a fourth. This is what I should have said.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, no, it's okay. We can be a flexible 3. It's fine.
Okay, so I'm going to give you 4. Don't sign up to a 45-minute workout. You will never make it to the end of a 45-minute workout, because I found that babies only sleep for about 43 minutes max. And why 45 or an hour long postpartum workouts exist, I'm not too sure, because I found that a newborn sleep cycle is not that long. So sign up for something like 20 minutes definitely in the beginning, or 30 minutes, so you can do it, enjoy it. You're not worrying about, is the baby going to wake up, or having to, like give the death stare to a monitor because you're like, please don't. So you can actually enjoy that time and again take the pressure off. So look for something which is about 20 minutes and you've got more chance of making it through and finishing it.
That is a great one. I totally agree. 20 minutes is so much more realistic, isn't it? Definitely. than trying to squeeze an hour in. Oh, Amy, thank you so much for coming on to join us and just sharing your real, honest experience, because I think that is one of the most valuable things we can do to support women as women, is just keeping it real and honest. So I'm really, really grateful for your time and for chatting with us today.
Honestly, it's absolute pleasure to come on and to chat to you, and thank you to everyone who's listened in. I really hope that you are enjoying your postpartum journey and enjoy those newborn cuddles. It's only 4.5 months ago since Huxley was born, and that already feels like forever ago, and I miss the skin to skin. So if you're having that right now, really enjoy it.
Absolutely enjoy it and do your pelvic floor, but don't worry about going for runs.
Yeah, join me in a few months.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Amy. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.